Captain Zethkar clicked his mandibles in amusement as he studied the primitive human vessel floating helplessly in the void before his flagship. The small craft looked pathetic compared to his massive battle cruiser, a gleaming monument to Vorthan military superiority that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship," reported his communications officer, her voice carrying the same dismissive tone that had become standard when dealing with these backwards creatures. "Put it through," Zethkar commanded, settling back into his command throne with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a middle-aged human male with graying hair and tired eyes. The man wore what appeared to be a simple blue uniform, nothing like the elaborate ceremonial armor that adorned proper military officers. "This is Captain James Morrison of the exploration vessel Odyssey," the human said, his voice steady despite his obviously desperate situation. "We're experiencing engine failure and request safe passage through this system." Zethkar laughed, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the bridge. Around him, his crew joined in the mockery. The idea that these primitive apes would request anything from the mighty Vorthan Empire was beyond ridiculous. "Human," Zethkar spoke with the tone one might use to address a particularly stupid child. "You are in Vorthan space without permission. Your pathetic species has been deemed unworthy of joining the Galactic Federation. You will surrender your vessel for inspection, and we will decide if you deserve to live." The human captain's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "We're not looking for trouble. Our ship is damaged, and we just need to reach the nearest repair facility. We'll be out of your space within 48 hours. 48 hours? Zethkar's second-in-command, Commander Vextal, stepped forward. "Captain, why waste time with negotiations? We should just destroy them and be done with it." The suggestion drew approving murmurs from the bridge crew. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as a weak species that had somehow managed to stumble into space travel despite lacking any real military capability. Their ships were slow, their weapons primitive, and their tactics laughably basic. Zethkar held up a clawed hand for silence. He was enjoying this too much to end it quickly. "Tell me, human, what weapons does your little ship carry? I'm curious what your species considers adequate for defense." Captain Morrison hesitated for a moment before responding. "We carry standard defensive systems. Nothing that would threaten a ship of your size and capabilities." "Show me," Zethkar demanded. "I want to see these defensive systems of yours." The human captain looked uncomfortable. "I don't think that's necessary. We're not here to fight." "But I insist," Zethkar said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Either you show me your weapons willingly, or I'll scan your ship and find them myself. The choice is yours." Morrison sighed and turned to someone off-screen. "Lieutenant Shun, prepare to transmit our weapons manifest to the Vorthan vessel." Moments later, data began streaming across the tactical displays on the Vorthan bridge. Zethkar's tactical officer, a young male named Crixlow, began reading the information aloud. "Captain, they're showing plasma cannons, particle beam arrays, and something called nuclear torpedoes." Crixlow paused, confusion evident in his voice. "Sir, I'm not familiar with this nuclear designation." Zethkar leaned forward with interest. "Nuclear torpedoes? What an unusual name." "Computer, search the database for information on human nuclear weapons." The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately. "Nuclear weapons are primitive explosive devices that utilize atomic fission or fusion reactions. They were commonly used by pre-spaceflight civilizations for planetary warfare. Technology level, obsolete. Threat assessment, minimal." The bridge erupted in laughter. Commander Vextal was practically wheezing with amusement. "Captain, did you hear that? They're carrying weapons that the computer classifies as obsolete. What's next? Are they going to threaten us with pointed sticks?" "This is rich," laughed the weapons officer. "Nuclear weapons. I learned about those in military history class. Some primitive species actually used to split atoms for warfare before they developed proper energy weapons. It's like bringing a wooden club to a plasma fight." Zethkar wiped tears from his compound eyes. Human captain, surely you jest. You cannot seriously expect to defend yourself with such ancient technology. Nuclear weapons went out of style 10,000 years ago. On the view screen, Captain Morrison's expression remained stoic. They served their purpose. Their purpose? Zethkar could barely contain his mirth. What purpose could such primitive weapons possibly serve against modern military vessels? Our shields alone could deflect a dozen of your little atom bombs. Perhaps, Morrison replied quietly. But we found that sometimes the old ways work just as well as the new ones. This statement only increased the laughter on the bridge. Crixlow was analyzing the torpedo specifications and shaking his head in disbelief. Captain, according to these readings, their most powerful nuclear torpedo has a yield of only 50 megatons. Our point defense systems could neutralize something that weak without even raising alerts. 50 megatons. Commander Bextal exclaimed. I've seen mining charges more powerful than that. What do they plan to do? Scratch our paint. Zethkar activated the communication channel again. Human, I'm almost disappointed. When I heard your species had managed to reach the stars, I expected you might have developed at least marginally competent military technology. Instead, you're flying around with museum pieces. Every weapon has its place, Morrison said simply. Indeed, Zethkar agreed mockingly. And the place for nuclear weapons is in a history museum. Now then, since you've provided such entertaining information about your laughably obsolete arsenal, I'm prepared to be generous. Surrender your ship immediately, and I'll ensure your crew receives proper prison accommodations rather than simply spacing you. The human captain was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focusing on something beyond the camera. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. I'm afraid I can't do that, Captain. My orders are to protect this ship and its cargo at all costs. Cargo? Zethkar's interest was piqued. What could you possibly be carrying that's worth dying for? Archaeological specimens, Morrison replied. Artifact from humanity's early history. They're irreplaceable. The Vorthan captain's mandibles clicked in amusement. You're going to die protecting old rocks and pottery? How wonderfully primitive of you. Not rocks and pottery, Morrison said quietly. Something far more important than that. Zethkar had heard enough. The entertainment value of this encounter was beginning to wear thin, and he had a schedule to maintain. Very well, human. Since you refuse to see reason, I'll give you a demonstration of what real weapons can do. Perhaps after I vaporize a few sections of your hull, you'll reconsider your position. He turned to his weapons officer. Target their engine section with a low-power plasma burst. Nothing fatal, just enough to get their attention. Targeting engines, sir, the weapons officer confirmed. Charging plasma cannons to 15% power. On the view screen, Captain Morrison nodded grimly. If that's how you want to play it. He turned to his crew. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for combat operations. Ready the special package. Special package? Zethkar left. What are you going to do? Throw nuclear firecrackers at us. Something like that, Morrison replied, and for the first time since the conversation began, he smiled. The expression sent an unexpected chill down Zethkar's spine. There was something unsettling about that smile, something that suggested the human knew something the Vorthans didn't. But that was impossible. Humans were primitive, technologically inferior creatures who had barely mastered interstellar flight. What could they possibly know that the mighty Vorthan Empire didn't? Fire when ready, Zethkar commanded, pushing aside his momentary unease. The plasma blast lanced across space, striking the human vessel's engine section. The small ship shuddered under the impact, but, to Zethkar's surprise, it remained intact. Interesting, he mused. Their hull is more resilient than expected. Very well, increase power to 30% and fire again. As his crew prepared for the second shot, Zethkar noticed something odd on his tactical display. The human ship was launching something small, barely visible on sensors. Captain, Crixlow called out, they've fired a single torpedo. Should I target it with point defense? Zethkar waved a dismissive hand. Don't bother. Let's see what their obsolete nuclear weapon can do against our shields. It should provide additional entertainment. The torpedo moved slowly compared to modern weapons, almost leisurely drifting toward the Vorthan battlecruiser. Zethkar watched with amusement as his crew tracked its approach. Impact in 30 seconds, sir, reported the tactical officer. Are you recording this? Zethkar asked his communications officer. I want to preserve this moment for posterity. The day a human tried to attack a Vorthan battlecruiser with a nuclear firecracker. The bridge crew chuckled as they watched the primitive weapon approach their mighty vessel. None of them paid attention to the small readings appearing on their secondary sensors. Readings that indicated this particular nuclear torpedo was somewhat different from the specifications they had been shown. 10 seconds to impact, Crixlow announced. Brace for the tickle, Commander Vextal joked. The torpedo struck the ship's forward shields and detonated. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the universe turned white. The white light faded gradually, like a sunset in reverse, revealing a scene that defied everything Captain Zethkar thought he knew about nuclear weapons. Where his mighty battlecruiser's forward shields had been, there was now nothing but twisted metal and sparking conduits. Report. Zethkar roared, his confident demeanor evaporating as alarms blared throughout the bridge. Crixlow frantically worked at his tactical console, his mandibles clicking in distress. Captain, forward shields are completely down. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We've lost primary sensor arrays and the main forward weapons battery. That's impossible. Commander Vextal snarled. It was just a primitive nuclear weapon, 50 megatons at most. Sir, the ship's engineer spoke up from his station, voice shaking with disbelief. I'm reading radiation signatures I don't recognize. This wasn't a standard nuclear device. On the view screen, Captain Morrison's image flickered back to life. The human's tired eyes now held a grim satisfaction. Captain Zethkar, I try to warn you. Sometimes the old ways work better than you might expect. What did you do? Zethkar demanded, his usual composure cracking. That was no ordinary nuclear weapon. Morrison nodded slowly. You're correct. What you just experienced was a weapon my species developed during our early space age, before we learned to play nice with the galactic community. We call it a stellar forge torpedo. Stellar forge. The term meant nothing to Zethkar, but the damage to his ship was undeniable. During our nuclear age, human scientists discovered that under very specific conditions, they could create a sustained fusion reaction that mimics what happens inside a star's core. Morrison explained. The initial nuclear detonation was just the trigger. What followed was a miniature star, burning for approximately 2.7 seconds. The bridge fell silent except for the continuing alarms. Commander Vextal stared at the tactical readouts in horror. A miniature star? That's theoretical technology. Even the most advanced species in the Federation haven't mastered stellar manipulation. Theoretical for most species, Morrison agreed. But humans have always had a talent for making the impossible merely improbable. We developed this technology 300 years ago, then sealed it away when we realized how dangerous it was. Zethkar felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. If you've had this capability for centuries, why does the Galactic Database classify human weapons as primitive? Because we let you believe that, Morrison replied simply. After our first contact with alien civilizations, human leadership decided it was better to appear weak and harmless. We shared information about our basic nuclear weapons, our conventional plasma cannons, and our standard defensive systems. We never mentioned the weapons we developed during our darker periods. The tactical officer looked up from his console with growing panic. Captain, I'm detecting movement from the human vessel. They're launching additional torpedoes. How many? Zethkar asked, though he dreaded the answer. 12. No, 15, sir. I count 20 torpedoes incoming. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Those are standard nuclear warheads, Captain. 50 megatons each, just as your database indicated. Of course, after what just happened to your forward shields, I imagine even standard nuclear weapons might pose a problem. Zethkar realized with growing horror that the human was right. Without their forward shields, his battlecruiser was vulnerable to weapons that should have been obsolete. 2050 megaton warheads would tear his ship apart. Evasive maneuvers, he commanded. All power to remaining shields. Sir, the helmsman reported, the stellar forge detonation damaged our primary engines. We can't outrun those torpedoes. Point defense systems. Zethkar barked. Shoot them down. Crixlow worked frantically at his weapons console. Forward point defense is offline. I'm engaging with lateral batteries. The view screen showed streams of defensive fire reaching out toward the approaching nuclear warheads. Several torpedoes exploded in brilliant flashes as the point defense systems found their marks, but others continued their relentless approach. 8 torpedoes incoming. Crixlow announced. 4, 3, impact. The battlecruiser shuddered as nuclear fire bloomed against its weakened hull. Without the protection of its forward shields, armor plating that had seemed impenetrable moments before began to buckle and tear. Hull breaches across the forward section, the damage control officer reported. We're losing atmosphere on multiple decks. Morrison's image remained steady on the view screen, watching with the cold professionalism of someone who had done this before. Captain Zethkar, I'm prepared to offer terms for your surrender. Surrender? Zethkar's voice cracked with indignation. The Vorthan Empire does not surrender to primitives. Then, you haven't been paying attention, Morrison replied. I just disabled your most powerful warship with weapons your own computer classified as obsolete. What does that tell you about the reliability of your intelligence? Commander Vextal stepped forward, his normally pristine uniform now torn and stained with coolant fluid from damaged systems. Captain, perhaps we should consider never. Zethkar cut him off. Bring us about. Target their engines with everything we have. The massive battlecruiser began its ponderous turn, bringing its undamaged weapons to bear on the small human vessel. But as it moved, Morrison spoke again. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Captain. You see, there are some things about human military doctrine you should understand before this goes any further. What things? Zethkar asked, though he continued his attack preparations. First, we never travel alone. My ship may appear to be by itself, but I can assure you it isn't. As if on cue, new contacts appeared on the Vorthan sensors. 3 more human vessels materialized from what had appeared to be empty space, their stealth systems disengaging simultaneously. Crixlow's voice rose an octave. Captain, 3 more human ships just appeared. They were hiding behind stealth screens. Impossible Vextal Breted. Our sensors would have detected any ships in this system. Human stealth technology is based on principles your people haven't discovered yet, Morrison explained calmly. We learned a long time ago that sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know exists. The new vessels were larger than Morrison's exploration ship, clearly built for combat. Their hulls bristled with weapons that looked far more advanced than anything in the galactic database on human military capabilities. The second thing about human military doctrine, Morrison continued, is that we believe in overwhelming superiority. We don't fight fair because fair fights are for sports, not survival. Multiple targeting locks. Crixlow reported in panic. All 3 ships are charging weapons. Sir, I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Morrison's expression remained impassive. The Galactic Federation has always underestimated humanity because they judge us by our public face. They see our exploration ships, our trade vessels, our diplomatic missions. They assume that's all we are. One of the new human ships opened communications. The face that appeared was that of a stern woman with short silver hair and scars across her left cheek. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Fleet Vessel Retribution. Captain Zethkar, you have 30 seconds to surrender your ship or we will destroy it. Zethkar stared at the human admiral in disbelief. Human Defense Fleet? Our intelligence reports indicate that humanity has no organized military. Your intelligence is deliberately incomplete, Admiral Chun replied coldly. We've spent the last century allowing other species to believe we're harmless while we prepared for the day when someone would decide to test that assumption. Morrison nodded toward the Admiral's image. Admiral Chun represents the part of humanity that most aliens never see. We have exploration vessels like mine for peaceful contact, but we also have ships like hers for when peaceful contact fails. This is a trick. Zethkar protested. Humans are weak. Your technology is primitive. The Galactic Federation has classified your species as barely spacefaring. The Galactic Federation classifies us based on information we chose to share, Admiral Chin corrected. We let them see fusion reactors while we developed antimatter drives. We showed them nuclear missiles while we perfected stellar forge technology. We demonstrated basic shields while we created armor that can withstand direct hits from weapons your people consider state-of-the-art. The tactical displays on the Vorthen Bridge painted an increasingly desperate picture. The 3 human warships had positioned themselves in a perfect attack formation, their weapons charged and ready. More concerning were the energy readings Crixlow was detecting. Captain, the tactical officer reported with growing fear. These ships are generating power levels that should be impossible for vessels their size. According to my readings, each of those ships has more firepower than our entire battle group. Morrison looked directly into the camera. Captain Zethkar, I'm going to tell you something that might save your life and the lives of your crew. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting wars on our home planet. We learned how to kill efficiently, how to destroy completely, and how to win against impossible odds. Then we went to the stars and discovered a galaxy full of species that had never truly known war. What do you mean? Zethkar asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Most galactic civilizations developed peacefully, Admiral Chin explained. They had territorial disputes, trade disagreements, minor conflicts. But they never experienced total war, never faced extinction, never had to develop weapons capable of destroying entire planets just to survive. Morrison nodded grimly. Humans did. For most of our history, war was constant. We developed nuclear weapons not as a curiosity, but as a necessity for survival. We learned to fight in space not for exploration, but for conquest. The weapons you've seen today are the result of centuries of conflict that most species can't even imagine. You're bluffing, Zethkar said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Morrison gestured to his damaged battlecruiser. Your ship was considered the finest example of Vorthen military engineering. It had shields that were supposed to be impenetrable, armor that was supposed to be indestructible. I disabled it with a single torpedo-carrying technology we developed 3 centuries ago and considered too dangerous to use. Admiral Chin's expression hardened. Time's up, Captain. What's your decision? Zethkar looked around his ruined bridge, at his terrified crew, at the tactical displays showing his ship surrounded and outgunned. Everything he had believed about human capabilities had been proven wrong in the span of minutes. But admitting defeat to these primitives would mean the end of his career, possibly his life. The Vorthen Empire did not tolerate failure, especially failure against supposedly inferior species. All weapons, he commanded quietly. Fire everything we have at the human ships. His crew hesitated for a moment before following orders. Every remaining weapon on the battlecruiser discharged simultaneously, sending streams of plasma and particle beams toward the 3 human warships. The humans didn't even bother to evade. Their shields absorbed the barrage effortlessly, the energy dispersing harmlessly across defensive barriers that glowed briefly before returning to their normal transparency. Admiral Chun sighed. I was hoping you'd be smarter than that, Captain. Retribution, Perseus, Normandy. Execute attack pattern Omega. The 3 human ships moved with a coordination that spoke of years of joint training. Their weapons, when they finally fired, painted space with colors Zethkar had never seen before. The weapons that struck Zethkar's battlecruiser defied every principle of energy warfare he had ever learned. Instead of the familiar blues and greens of plasma discharge, or the clean white of particle beams, These weapons painted space in violent shades of crimson and gold that seemed to tear reality itself. Hull integrity failing across all sections, his damage control officer screamed over the cacophony of failing systems. Whatever they're hitting us with, it's not just destroying our armor. It's destabilizing the molecular bonds. Zethkar watched in horrified fascination as sections of his once mighty warship simply ceased to exist. Not blown apart, not melted, simply gone, as if the universe had decided that particular piece of metal no longer deserved to exist. Quantum dissolution weapons. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos with clinical precision. They target the strong nuclear force that holds atomic nuclei together. Your shields can't stop them because they don't interact with electromagnetic fields. That's impossible. Commander Vextal gasped, clutching a support beam as the ship shuddered around them. Quantum manipulation requires computational power beyond anything portable. Morrison's image flickered back onto the main screen. Commander, you keep using that word. I don't think you understand what humans consider possible. Another wave of crimson energy swept across the battlecruiser's midsection. Where it touched, solid matter transformed into its component atoms, which immediately dispersed into space. The ship groaned as structural supports that had existed moments before simply weren't there anymore. Captain, Crixlow called out, his voice cracking with terror. We've lost 40% of our hull mass. Life support is failing on decks 12 through 18. Zethkar stared at the tactical display, watching his ship die piece by piece. Each section that vanished took with it dozens of crew members, brave Vorthans who had served with honor and distinction. They deserved better than this. Admiral Chun, he spoke into the communication channel, his pride finally cracking. We surrender. Please stop the attack. The dissolution beams ceased immediately, leaving the remnants of the battlecruiser floating in space like a half-eaten carcass. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise of destruction had been. Thank you, Captain, Admiral Chen replied. That was the smart choice. Smart. Zitkar left bitterly. I just surrendered the pride of the Vorthan fleet to a species we considered primitive. There's nothing smart about this situation. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Captain, there's something you need to understand. This encounter wasn't random. We've been monitoring Vorthan military movements for months. Monitoring? How? The same way we've been monitoring every major military power in this part of the galaxy, Admiral Chen answered. We have listening posts, observation satellites, and intelligence networks that your people never suspected existed. Zethkar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support systems. What are you saying? We know about the Vorthan Empire's expansion plans, Morrison continued. We know about your surveys of human space, your military assessments, your classified discussions about whether humanity represents a threat that needs to be eliminated. The Vorthan captain's mandibles clicked nervously. Those discussions were supposed to be absolutely secret, conducted in the highest levels of government and military command. If the humans knew about them, your high command has been planning an invasion of human space for 6 months, Admiral Chun stated flatly. 3 battle fleets, 200 ships total, designed to neutralize the human threat before we could develop more advanced technology. That's classified beyond top secret, Vextal whispered. Not to us, Morrison replied. We've had agents in your government since first contact. We've been watching, learning, preparing. Admiral Chen's image leaned forward. Did you really think we would make contact with a galactic community without taking precautions? Humans learned long ago that trust is earned, not given. Zethkar tried to process this information. Agents? In the Vorthan government. In every government, Morrison confirmed. Human agents have been operating throughout Federation space for decades. We look enough like several other humanoid species that infiltration wasn't difficult, especially with the right genetic modifications. Zethkar struggled for words. This is exactly the kind of deception that proves humans can't be trusted. Really, Admiral Chen's voice turned cold. We're the ones who can't be trusted? Let me remind you how this conversation started. You attacked a damaged civilian vessel that was requesting safe passage through your space. You mocked our weapons, threatened our crew, and refused every attempt at peaceful resolution. Morrison nodded. We didn't start this fight, Captain. We just finished it. But the broader conflict is something else entirely, Admiral Chin continued. Your invasion fleet is gathering at the Kelthara shipyards right now. 3 dreadnoughts, 12 battle cruisers, 30 destroyers, and over 100 support vessels. Quite impressive. How do you know about Kelthara? Zitkar demanded. That facility is in the most secure system in our territory. Because one of your senior logistics officers has been working for us for 2 years, Morrison replied casually. Commander Tichwa Siskar has been very helpful in keeping us informed about Vorthan military movements. The name hit Zethkar like a physical blow. Tichwa Siskar was his own brother-in-law, a trusted member of his family, a patriot who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. You're lying, he whispered. I'm afraid not, Admiral Chin said gently. Commander Tichwa Siskar approached us after discovering that the Empire's expansion plans included the systematic extermination of several primitive species, including the Kelrani and the Vorthak. He found those orders morally troubling. Morrison picked up the thread. You see, Captain, not all Vorthans support their government's more aggressive policies. Some of your people believe in coexistence rather than conquest. This is impossible, Vextal muttered. The Empire has spent centuries building our intelligence networks. We have the best counterintelligence in the galaxy. You have the best counterintelligence for dealing with other galactic civilizations, Admiral Chin corrected. But you've never faced an opponent that learned espionage and warfare on a planet where survival depended on being better at killing than everyone else. Morrison's tone became almost professorial. Every species in the Federation developed in relatively peaceful environments. Yes, you had conflicts, but nothing like the constant warfare that shaped human evolution. You never needed to become truly good at deception, infiltration, or long-term strategic planning. What are you saying? Zethkar asked, though he suspected he already knew. We're saying that this encounter was a test, Admiral Chin replied. We needed to see how Vorthan military commanders would react to unexpected resistance. We needed to understand your tactical thinking, your technological capabilities, and your willingness to pursue aggressive action even when facing superior force. The realization hit Zethkar like a fusion blast. This was planned. All of it. You let me find your ship. You let me attack. We needed data, Morrison confirmed. Our intelligence networks told us what your leadership was planning, but we needed to see how individual commanders would behave. Would you accept our request for safe passage? Would you negotiate in good faith? Or would you immediately resort to violence against a clearly inferior opponent? You used me, Zethkar said bitterly. We evaluated you, Admiral Chin corrected. And unfortunately, you confirmed our worst assessments about Vorthan military culture. When faced with what you perceive as weakness, you immediately chose aggression and humiliation over diplomacy. Morrison nodded sadly. We hoped you might choose differently, Captain. We really did. It would have made everything much simpler. What happens now? Zethkar asked, dreading the answer. Admiral Chin's expression became businesslike. Now we implement Phase 2 of our defensive strategy. The information we've gathered from this encounter will be transmitted to the Human Defense Fleet Command. Within 6 hours, our forces will begin moving into position around the Kelthar system. You're going to attack our shipyards? We're going to prevent your invasion fleet from launching, Morrison clarified. We'd prefer to do this without bloodshed, but your government has made peaceful resolution impossible. The Empire will never surrender to humans, Zethkar declared with what little pride he had left. They will when they understand what they're really facing, Admiral Chun replied confidently. You see, Captain, this encounter wasn't just a test of Vorthan tactics. It was also a demonstration for your high command. Morrison smiled grimly. Every moment of this battle has been recorded and transmitted in real time to monitoring stations throughout Federation space. By now, Every major government knows exactly what happened here. What do you mean? They know that a single human exploration vessel defeated a Vorthan battlecruiser, Admiral Chen explained. They know that human stealth technology can hide entire fleets from the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. They know that human weapons can tear apart ships that were considered invincible. Morrison leaned forward. Most importantly, they know that humanity has been hiding its true capabilities for decades while building the most advanced military force this galaxy has ever seen. The implications crashed over Zethkar like a tidal wave. If the humans had been hiding their real strength, if they had been infiltrating governments and monitoring military activities, if they had weapons that could destabilize matter at the quantum level, the balance of power in this galaxy just shifted, Admiral Chun said quietly. Every species that was planning aggressive expansion, every government that thought humans were a convenient target, every military commander who believed might makes right, they all just received a very clear message. What message? Zethkar asked weakly. Morrison's expression was as cold as the void between stars. That humanity learned a long time ago how to fight wars that other species can't even imagine. We learned how to win before the enemy knows the battle has started. We learned how to be so devastatingly effective that victory becomes inevitable. And, most importantly, Admiral Chen added, we learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. Zethkar looked around his ruined bridge, at his defeated crew, at the tactical displays showing the remnants of his once mighty ship. Everything he had believed about human capabilities had been wrong. Everything his government believed about human weaknesses had been wrong. What happens to us? He asked finally. You'll be taken to a human medical facility for treatment, Morrison replied. After that, you'll be repatriated to Vorthan space with a message for your high command. What message? Admiral Chen's smile held no warmth whatsoever. That the age of galactic bullying is over. Humanity is no longer hiding. And anyone who threatens peaceful species will discover just how creative humans can be when it comes to warfare. As rescue shuttles launched from the human warships, Zethkar reflected on the ancient human saying that had just proven prophetic. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who lets you think you're winning right up until the moment you lose everything. The humans have been playing a game that no one else knew existed, and they have been winning it for decades. Now, finally, they were ready to reveal the score. The galaxy would never be the same.